Dina. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Today we have an amazing panel. We have Vince Menzione, who is the founder of Cloudwave Partners, and we also have Mary Williamson, who is the VP for Apps and Infrastructure at Microsoft. I have also invited Dina herself to join us on stage. I've had the pleasure of working with Dina for a few months at Microsoft when I was there, and she left such an amazing impression of me, and so I really am thrilled to have her lend her voice and her perspective to this conversation. So let me take you through very quickly on how we're going to structure this panel. First, I will open up the panel discussion with introductions. Every single one of the panelists will give us a quick, intro to who they are and define their personal meaning and framework of establishing, authority in the workplace. Then I will flow into two other sections, talking about what it means to take a seat at a table, and also, talk about how to handle some challenging situations. What I'm really hoping is that you guys in the audience will leave with really strong tools that you can start applying in your day-to-day. And also, as the panel flows along, please don't hesitate to put in your questions in the Q&A, and I will be actively monitoring it as well. So with that, let's just turn to our power panel, and I'll ask each one of you, and maybe let's just start with Mary first. Mary, could you please perhaps kick off an intro of who you are and your journey? And I'm also curious if you could give me your perspective on what role does authority have in the workplace today?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks for having me here. It's one of the more exciting parts of my week and year so far. Let me introduce myself, Mary Williamson. I'm the Vice President of Azure Apps and Infra at Microsoft. If you haven't heard about the cloud, come see us. It's a great business. It's really exciting to have global responsibility and accountability for looking at what customers need to go do and connect them back to our complex technologies and make it easy for them to make business decisions. A little bit about myself. I've been in a career of technology for over 20-something odd years. I actually started in R&D and kind of product and then sales later. And so when I think about the things I've learned about authority, it has really changed over the course of time in looking up, looking across, and then looking down in the organization, how much more power I think people realize they don't have until later on in their careers, and then they're more comfortable taking that power. So I'd love to talk about really looking and pausing where you are in that trajectory, and are you as mature and embracing what people are expecting you to go do and taking that power. So that's what I'd love to talk about today.
That's fantastic. And how about you, Vince, if you give a quick intro as well? I think, Vince, you might be on mute.
Realized my mic was muted there, so sorry. So thank you very much, Sharon, and thank you all. So great to be here with all of you. So many friends, both in the audience and here within this panel. I've described my career as 4 successful transformations: a startup, a turnaround, 9 years as Microsoft's general manager for U.S. public sector partner strategy, where I also was the first D&I lead for the U.S. public sector business before it was fashionable. And I also led a program, Next Steps, in the U.S. partner organization for early and career professionals. I'm also on the advisory task force now for Voices for Innovation, which is an advocacy group that ensures the tech is used for good. I'm passionate about overcoming adversity and believe that we as leaders have both an opportunity and an obligation to lead during this time. We're at a time like no other, and we've been void of leadership in so many areas. And it's really a time for all of us to step up. I also host a successful podcast, Ultimate Guide to Partnering, where I interview great leaders from all walks of life, a lot of people within the Microsoft ecosystem, to talk about their business and how partnership is an important and vital component of it, but also to share their career journey and lessons learned for all of us to learn how to step up and get to a particular spot in our life and how to overcome challenges that we faced. I find great joy in helping these amazing leaders elevate their voices, and I hope to be a champion of change, and I'm certainly an ally, and just delighted to be here on this panel today.
Over to you, Dina. And I'd love to hear. anything you'd like to add to your introduction, and maybe, taking the lens of this particular topic, like, what does that mean to you?
Sure, absolutely. So, interestingly enough, I started my career in really when it got started in commercial real estate back in the mid 90s, and it's actually what brought me to Microsoft. Cushman and Wakefield needed a marketing manager for what was called the Commons, which we all know if you're in Redmond or you visited main campus. It's our sort of town community within the Microsoft Pacific Northwest campus. So I launched that. It was quite a learning curve coming into Microsoft from traditional commercial real estate interactions. And what it helped me do is I studied all of the different types of people, not only vendors like myself, but people that I was working with, stakeholders at Microsoft. And to your point of that authority, it was watching people and how they interacted with their leadership styles. And I was really inspired. So I actually left Cushman and Wakefield, a company that I love, still very good friends that work there and great relationship. But I actually moved into becoming a vendor so I could actually take on many roles and learn more about myself and the business. And so I really learned by digging in, by being uncomfortable, and by watching others and their leadership style. So I would say throughout my career, was a vendor for about 4.5 years and held multiple different positions, running the cloud track for WPC and MGX when no one knew what the cloud was, and just putting myself in these positions that would challenge me. And I became an FTE almost 8 years ago, starting in executive engagement, running all of our big events for Microsoft and how we showed up with our strategy. And now, going to one commercial partner and now to AI and sustainability, which is new, where I used to run sort of the relationship with IdeaGen and Women in Cloud as a side project. It's now become part of my remit. So I think just the message is that, if you really are passionate about something, just go for it. And then it could actually become your day job.
Oh, that's lovely. I always think about the word authority, and it just has so much different meaning to it. Some people think that it's associated with respect, power, something else maybe. So I'm actually going to pose this question to Mary. I'm really curious, from your perspective, what do you think is that relationship then between, say, authority and power, and how would you piece that apart?
That's a great question. I think these words get kicked around. When you really think about them, it makes you really introspective. And then I think, like what Dina was saying, like, what have you seen around you? And I think obviously more power aligns to more formal authority. Really understanding who has that formal authority is one thing that I've gotten better at, right? It's a skill of really doing that formal and informal assessment of who has that informal authority and formal authority around you. And then also recognizing that we all have some level of power that we're bringing in. If you're at a company, if you're consulting for a company, if you're showing up and you've asked to be there, you have power because you own something. You're committed to showing what you're going to deliver, and that gives you power. And I think that's the practice that we all should aspire to. And even even after practicing for 20 some odd years, I still practice this. Am I taking the space? Am I helping keep others accountable for helping me keep my space? So I think that there is that interplay and practice of power and accountability that starts and can be applied even outside of the workspace. It's very important for me to keep that balance of power and accountability as a working mom, as a woman in my community, as an athlete who plays on teams, to make sure that I'm comfortable, because any of those times I feel off affect the other areas.
Yeah, I really love that answer, because it seems like, we all showing up, the consistency of showing up and holding yourself accountable cumulatively leads to you gaining power and authority and recognition, and just showing that to others that you're someone that someone else can count on. And that, as I heard you speak, it also made me think a lot about just culture at work. I'm quite curious, like, all of you guys all work in, large organizations. How do you maintain the culture of a workplace while at the same time, establishing your authority? And I sometimes find it really hard to do that gracefully. So I'm curious, like, how have you managed to successfully maintain that culture, maintain your identity, at the same time establish authority?
Yeah, and I'm happy to start, Sharon, because I think it was about 3 years ago, myself and I'm Hispanic, I'm Latinx, Hispanic Latinx, and we really felt there was a need for more cultural awareness and career development that we could be doing with, in particular, Microsoft US as a division of our employee resource group, OLA. So we founded TolentoUS, which it differs from OLA. Instead of just cultural awareness, it really does that career development side. But that's where we can uniquely lean in with our power of the knowledge of the community that was, needed to be better served within Microsoft, because we're one of the sort of smallest demographics within the company. So I think that is just in and of itself creates this power and this sort of authority in terms of leading by example and being the change that we needed to see within our community to be able to provide more opportunities for Hispanic, Latinx employees and individuals, not only within the company to, definitely grow your career, but also recruit to, a much needed, demographic within the company.
Fantastic. And Vince, you've been such an amazing ally over a number of years, and you really like thought about building a diverse team of women working on your team before even diversity became like a thing. That was like just back like 8 years ago, whatever it was. So I know you have been such an amazing champion. So I'm curious too, like your perspective as a male ally, how do you effectively, establish authority at the same time demonstrate humility? I think that's really hard to do. It's challenging for men to do too.
Well, I think it's challenging for everyone to do. I come back to, first of all, we're living in a time like no other. So I think there's actually some opportunity. I see the light at the end of the rainbow, in fact, in what we're going through right now, and that each of us have this opportunity and to show and to discover and show our unique talents to the world and be bold. And, the stakes are high. We should bet on ourselves. I believe we can front load our authority and actually have a framework around what we do. First of all, what I believe we need to do is be clear. Like, what are our first principles? What do we foundationally believe in? I talked about Dr. Michael Gervais before we came on. He was a guest on my podcast. We talked about first principles and developing a personal philosophy. Like, what are you grounded in? What are your guiding principles? What do you stand for as an individual, regardless of sex or race or gender and so on? And then look at it from the lens of what am I looking to accomplish? Like, my seat at the table, what does that seat mean to me? What is my mission for that seat? Like, what is my overarching strategy and mission for what I'm looking to achieve? And what do I want my brand to be? So we need to get clear first on that. I think that's foundationally where we set up. And then I look around the table and I find intuitively that, and I've heard this from other women that have worked for me, that women are not as good at connecting and building alliances and networking. Like, that is an area of growth that I've heard other people tell me. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I do know that connecting, building allies, building a network and of people to support you. And it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to come to the table and be empathetic with others, and come with what you're looking to achieve and to communicate. And then that's the third point, is communicate. Tell your story, tell your brand. Like, I loved it when people came to me with a very strong point of view and vision and objective that they were looking to achieve. And I could get behind that. And maybe I didn't get behind it right away, but I ultimately got behind it. And I think that's important. Like, you need to get clear on what you're going to do. You need to connect with others and not do it in a way. The best way to do it is individual, right? One-to-one, build this consensus around the table and then while you're doing that, also there's the empathy portion that says, can we both win here? can I build support for what I'm looking to achieve, but also is there a win here for you as well? And I go back to Stephen Covey and 7 Habits and the win, the find the win with others there as well. But I think those are important principles. So be clear, connect, communicate, and build consensus. And I think that's a great way to establish authority. And, I think that sometimes what happens is not doing those foundational things and not having a framework. We get to the table and our authority is usurped. We don't have the authority we should have. And I think that if we follow some of these, what I call first principles, it'll help us be more successful.
You just said, Vince, and I think a number of folks in the chat as well also remarked that's really wise words, and it's true, women should connect more and build alliances. So I love how you laid it out in a very clear framework. And, I'd like to address one question to Q&A right after I post this other question to Mary and Dina. I think, Vince, you brought up a couple of things, that women are not as good at building alliances and networking. Mary, I would especially love to hear from you as a VP in Microsoft, and you've got such a powerful place and powerful seat there. Really curious, what are your tips and tricks or advice to women in terms of addressing this gap that we have about building alliances and networking? Love to hear your thoughts.
Oh my gosh, that's a big question. And I think there's the building alliances and networking. There's almost like hierarchy of how you think about things. And I love where Vince went, which is where I go when I talk to a lot of women and just mentees one-on-one, which is you have to know where you're starting from. You have to be confident in your own story and your own brand. And I give homework to anyone who comes to me seeking help to say, I need something different. I'm either not in a good place or I'm exploring something and I need help to grow. I would say a majority of time when I say, what do you do today? And what is your impact? And what do you seek next? Most people stop. They don't know how to tell that story. And that's a red flag to me to say, it's hard to build alliances and networks if you can't introduce yourself and say, here's the top 3 or 4 things I'm working on. Here's the impact that I have in my day job. And here's what I seek next. So really that foundation is super important. And once you get that right, that is this springboard for everything. It's the springboard for your alliances that you make with partners that you're just like, hey, this is what I do. I want to make you aware of it. Is there anything you need? Well, that person's going to totally understand your brand and also think about you when they see you performing really well, because then they know who did that. When you build a network, go outside the company and say, hey, now I need to explain this in terms that other people might not know. Well, you have to take the 3-letter acronyms out, you have to take the org charts out, and it's a practice of building that alliance. I think that there is a little more structure to this than people give it credit for. It's not just setting up an introduction and having an unstructured coffee. Those are great, but I think the structure is really underutilized. And I remember going back to college recruiting a number of years ago, and I would chide a lot of college students that they didn't spend any time on their resume. And I'm like, what are you doing staying up all night, 80 hours a week, working so hard? And this is the brand, right? You have to really work on this. It doesn't seem important, but it's what you're working towards. So I'd say the same thing for us all is making sure that you spend time on yourself and that communication plan.
Sick. And Dina, any thoughts about, you're very good at, building alliances, and actually I remember you doing it extremely effectively. So I'm really curious, do you have any advice on how one can effectively build a network or brand? Dina, I think you're on mute.
So sorry, yes. So thank you for the kind word, Sharon. And I love what Vince and Mary just said. I really believe that you have to be authentic. You have to build those brands when you come at it as yourself. And it's sometimes scary because we as human beings want to be liked. We want people to, see us for maybe what we think they want to see us as. But I think in this conversation around authority, I think it comes in so many different packages. And I like to think of authority as you have superpowers in different areas that you bring to the table. And that's your authority. It's not about a level. It's not about a title. And so I would say in building those alliances, establishing your brand by being that person you want people to see and being consistent. I think consistency is the best, the biggest thing. And I forget the word, it's a Mike Gervais, it's and I'll remember it, Vince, but it's about, doing the mundane work when it gets boring and tired, but staying with it because it's ultimately going to have a good outcome. And so it's that growth mindset that keeps you going. But again, authority, everyone has something great to offer, and people just need to see that. And, we all need everyone's superpowers to bring to the table to make the flywheel work, if you will.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Dina. I'm going to segue for a little moment into some questions from the audience. I think it's really important to just kind of address it throughout the conversation. So the top question that has been voted for is, how do you find power in a space that is new to you, where you want to show up but also don't have deep roots?
I mean, I'll come back to the framework, because I think especially it's even more important when you're new to a role or you're new to a space, that you be very clear about what your objectives are, like what, and then those objectives need to tie back to your first principles. I go back to mindset too, like having that growth mindset coming into the conversation. I firmly believe that we have everything we need already inside of us. Like we are our own worst enemies most times, and we tend to overreact or prejudge the intentions of others often. Not that it's not warranted, but I think sometimes we come into that rather than coming in from, I take a perspective now about being bold. I think this is a time where we all should be bold. If we can all achieve great things. We can all be a force for good, a force for what we want to achieve, whether it be a business outcome or a social outcome in our worlds. And so I do think that coming at it from the right mind, applying, what you're looking to achieve, making those connections because you are so new to it. And it's very difficult for all of us now because we're working remote. So if you're into a new space, you really have to be, I'll use the word aggressive, but in a good way, in terms of connecting with others, about establishing relationships with others, being empathetic to their needs, as well as sharing what you're looking to accomplish or what your goals or objectives may be, and communicating those, and then building consensus around, a common, like, where we can go do this together, right? I mean, I think being new to it, you're starting with a clear slate as well. So it actually makes it a little bit easier.
I would agree. And it's, I love the framework. It's I think, Vince, if you could even put that framework somewhere in the chat, that would be fantastic for everyone, because it's so actionable, so clear. And once you have the framework, it's just up to you to start doing the work. So getting a framework is just a start. But thank you. If you could even put that in, that'd be great.
The only thing that I would add to Vince's comments is I've seen incredible people who do this so well that they know how to enroll people and then they don't even know. Being new to a role, people want you to be successful. They remember being new. I think the only thing that you need to do is show up with your 3 or 5 things and say, I think I'm good on these. I would love your help. Is there someone I could work with? Should I be reading something? Am I not on a tool? Is there somebody to, XYZ? Is there a meeting I should be in? And you would be shocked on how quickly people open doors and then come back to you a week later. Are you okay now? Are you good? Because they enrolled in something that really was super easy for them because they know what you don't know. And you're not really giving them a task. You're giving them like a pat on the back to close their probably very hard week. Do it on a Friday afternoon. Say, this is a really easy question.
Asking for help, Mary, I that resonates so well with me. Both in the podcast, I ask all my guests, like, who were your greatest mentors? What advice did you ask from them? What was the best advice you received? I remember a young person at Microsoft who had just recently graduated university who came to me, and she's actually in the chat window right now, so I'm going to embarrass her a little bit. But she came to me and asked for my support, and she had a clear view of where she wanted to go with her career, and came to me at multiple stages along her career. She's now the founder of Lions and Tigers, Priya Starmer, and she was very intentional about building allies and building support. So I remember that experience very early on at Microsoft.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. And Bria's on this call right now. She is a rock star. That's right.
Yes, and Vince, I would agree. And we worked with Bria in OCP, and she was, again, that person that you study because she was so passionate and she just went for it. She was bold, she was curious, and she was a learn-it-all. And then she carved out this space within the industry that she knew had a gap. And so that, Bria, very inspiring.
Yes.
But I mean, to build on, what Vince and Mary says or have been saying, it is, finding that space in that room. You do have to be curious, and you do have to be a learn-it-all, and you have to make your intentions known. If people know you want to learn or become better at something, they're going to help you. There's a lot of empathy out there that, we've been talking about in terms of people wanting you to be successful. And so, and especially in a culture today, like where we're, in Microsoft, for example, where we're now we're rewarded for how we make others great. I mean, 5 or 6 years ago, that was not the case. We're rewarded for when we leverage others' work because our senior leadership team knows we can get more done when we collaborate and we can go faster together. So it's really has been a unique journey to see how, all of this has evolved.
Your comments are a perfect segue to one of the questions that, our audience raised. How do you handle situations when your ideas are passed on as someone else at work, to someone else at work because you're a woman? Very often as women, we run into situations where we either get spoken over or we hear other people just kind of like taking our ideas. So how do you do that? How do you do that effectively? How do you handle those situations effectively? Mary and Dina, what are some of your thoughts? I also love to hear Vince, because from your other side of the fence, how do you then help women on your team that you've seen in those situations too?
Gosh, I think there's a couple of things that I would say are kind of in the toolbox, because there's the in the moment, right? You're having the almost like stock commercial, or I think it's now been mimicked in memes so much of someone repeating and mansplaining back ideas, and everyone says that's brilliant. That still happens every day, and I think getting the courage to say, hold on, I think I just said that in different words, and everyone laughs. You kind of change, taking your power is super important, because a lot of times people aren't purposely doing it. There is the biases, there is just how people align with other people who think like themselves and hear them better than they hear you. And so having that courage to pause is a good practice. If you don't have the courage to pause, don't beat yourself up. Take the next opportunity with the people in the room, your boss, the people you work with, and say, how could I have done that better? Right? I think I had this idea, I didn't communicate well. Help me communicate it well next time. Don't dwell on the fact that you missed the window. Look at it as a learning opportunity, because worst case scenario, they just give you advice going forward. Best case scenario, you get connected back to the value of your idea. Right? But it all takes courage, and it all takes practice. And then it all goes back to know what your 3 or 5 things are, because once you have that brand, people can't take your space. When the idea comes out, it sticks with you because people know what you're about, and your credibility grows and grows and grows.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And I will say one sort of best practices that I, started a while back when, this behavior would, sort of go on. And I will say it's largely stopped within our organization. I don't see that very, very often anymore, because it is not rewarded, and people know that. I would actually, if I had an idea, I would actually make it an executive summary slide. What does that idea look like? Who's the audience? What's the mission? What's the objective? So I knew that if someone were to talk over me, I'd be like, oh, well, yeah, but here's an executive summary if you'd like to see it. And so then it uniquely became my, the idea that I originally would come up with. And then of course you take that and you collaborate with people, but it's just something I started a while back, but it serves me well because it actually organizes me, but it really helps me get grounded on that idea that, that I want to bring to life. And then it typically evolves from there.
And Vince, I'm curious for you, when you do see or hear females in your team get talked over, how do you handle that as a male ally?
I think Mary said, I hope it doesn't happen as often as it used to, but it does still happen. And here's the thing. I think you need to have male allies, and you need to have, this comes back to all the framework. There's still going to be some bad, if you have other people up and interject and say, no, I believe that so-and-so said this first, or this was a great idea, or stand behind your ideas, then I think that you at least have the opportunity. Again, if it does happen and you don't have the support, then maybe it is in fact a learning experience. And also there's the opportunity to go back to that person individually and with empathy and have an authentic conversation about how that could have been handled differently.
Very sound. Thank you, Vince.
I would also volunteer to say, I think there are enough of women in leadership positions. Find those female allies that might be blind to this. I think, I would really want to be held accountable if I had created an environment where that happened in a meeting that I was in. I would want someone to come and say, hey, I need your help in making sure this doesn't happen again, and support the idea that I came up with.
Thank you, Mary. Now that we also have you on the mic, I want to just direct this question to you and actually to Vince, because I know, Vince, you the last time you were at Microsoft, you were a GM in a role, and Mary, you're a VP now. Can you maybe tell us, this is actually a question from the Q&A section, how do you influence the top leaders in the organization when there are too many people in the chain of command? You think about the ones in your own chain of command, that have effectively influenced you. What are some of the things perhaps that you've seen work for people who are lower in the chain, who have effectively influenced people like yourselves? Maybe I'll start with you, Mary, and then turn over to Vince.
Yeah,
and then Dina, to hear Dina share her perspective as well.
Yeah, I think in general at Microsoft, my perception is pretty flat organization, and kind of the culture that Satya has built is very inclusive in every aspect. I feel like, and I encourage everyone in my organization full access, especially when they have ideas or insights or competitive information that we need. There should not be any chain of management that should delay that type of information. I find the best way to get through to me and kind of the noise of the many things that I have to manage in my limited time is to be extremely crisp and put yourself in my shoes, right? Put yourself in the leader's shoes. What is the very crisp executive summary or bullet points that will get my attention so I can understand? I think people underestimate that I trust. I have hundreds of people that work for me. I trust that they know more than I know about the thing that they do. And if they've taken the time to say, I'm going to write a piece of paper, an email, and put, you need to know this, I need help, this is the impact, you're going to get my attention. If you write me 10 pages, I don't have the time or ability to understand what you're trying to say. So it goes all back to, I think, what Vince and I keep ping-ponging between, that really crisp communication, but also, again, the confidence and the wherewithal to say, this might be scary. The executive or leader might say, no, I can't do it right now. And being okay with that and saying, I'm going to try it again. And in a culture that I trust, that if that person says no, the next time might be yes. And so I think that's a practice again, and I'm always encouraging people. And some people are more comfortable than others. And I try to put those people up and say, nothing bad happened to them, and only good things came from our business.
Having been on the U.S. public sector leadership team and then the U.S. partner leadership team before it was U.S. OCP, the best leaders that I witnessed were the ones who held their people up. And Microsoft does a lot of internal, business reviews, monthly business reviews, quarterly business reviews. Use the opportunity to talk about the business and the people in their organization that had achieved, and to kind of raise them up so that they got the visibility to the upper echelons, if you will, within the organization. And then also gave them the opportunity to have that access. One of the things we did at Next Step, but I think Next Step might still be around at Microsoft, but we created a we created a forum where annually we would bring the members of the Next Step organization in to meet with senior leaders. And we do this executive roundtable, and each of the people would get a half hour to present a little, whatever they wanted really, but mostly about themselves, their career, their aspirations. And it was a great way to expose talent within the organization. And so I think that's a great practice. Ensure that your people are getting the exposure to your leadership. So I think it's like lifting your team up to the next level within the organization and exposing the great talent which exists in the organization. There's some in any organization that, again, they don't get that visibility, that exposure. And then there's also the things like, whether it be special projects or shadowing executives, there's those opportunities for them. I would take advantage of all those opportunities to get senior leaders to see the people on my team, the great work that's happening in my team. It's a great way to demonstrate the work that's going on in the organization rather than you as the leader just sharing it with your leader.
Yeah, and I was going to just share that I can completely identify with what Vince is saying. I work in an organization where our leaders definitely ask our, the individual contributors, if you will, to present, to make sure that they get that time with the platform to share their work. And so I think that is really true leadership. So when a leader is able to hold up their people, and it's actually a reflection of if your people are really good, you're doing something right. So I think that is a telltale sign of a great leader.
And that's true. It is, the leaders that I love and respect are the ones who do provide opportunities for you to shine and do it in ways that you don't even know. And that's those are the ones that, also actually as leaders, they keep on rising through the organization because they bring your people up too. And that's certainly what I've noticed. I would love to turn to two more questions here, and they're in the Q&A section. One is actually a very interesting angle about, question about allyship, and I'd love to get that perspective. How do you prevent that allyship support is being perceived as the woman being weak and needing help? I think there is a misconception out there. So I think that's what the question's asking.
Yeah, I saw that question. I've never come at it from that point of view, so I suppose that may exist and I'm not quite sure. It's a tough one for me to answer, honestly.
I'm sorry to help you out there because I feel like I get versions of this in the different communities that I'm a part of, African American community, Latinx, and women in tech. That on one hand, building the community of like-minded people is amazing, but on the other hand, you don't want to be tokenized, right? You don't want to be asking for something that others further push you away from the mainstream community. And I remember a Black woman asked me in one of the presentations I was doing earlier this summer, I don't want to be perceived as this Black woman in the organization. My answer was, you are the Black person in the organization. You spending energy about how other people perceive you is wasted energy. If people vote to ally with you and help you, assume it's not because you're a woman or a Black woman. Assume it's because you're actually a decent human being who's doing a good job, and then put that positive energy out there. The amount of time I've spent in my life worrying about what other people think has diminished as I've gotten older, but it's hard. It's hard not to worry about that, but allyship should be a coming together thing. In Microsoft, just recently, we were rolling out training on covering allyship and privilege. And I just did an exercise with my team a couple of days ago where allyship is about everybody. All of our colleagues are always covering, it's so hard to show up authentically. If you're a white male, if you're an LGBTQ woman, we're all spending way too much time covering. So allying with everybody, this is how we try to get into this whole, bring your whole self to work. We're not there yet. We got to get there.
Loved your answer.
Need anything to add of Vince? This is such an interesting question because the topic allyship just it comes out a lot, and I think we're all, still trying to figure out how to live, what that definition means, and how do you build a framework to effectively be an ally. I think that's still a work in progress for a lot of us.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I really look for cues and clues of my peers, people I come into contact with, to just, are they covering, are they hiding something? Because honestly, when you do that, you don't bring your full potential to work, and we need an inclusive and diverse workforce to make products and services for the greater population that we serve. So we need people to understand, we need their unique lived experiences. And so when I, sense someone's covering, or they're trying to be something, and I know they're really good at maybe something they perceive as cultural, and they don't want that to come out, I just try to, gently, coach them on, you should really, show that talent. It's so amazing, or share that story. So just, I think that in and of itself, that type of allyship, when you sense someone is covering, I think that's also an important piece of it.
Okay, thank you, Dina. I know in the last 7 minutes of our discussion, I do want to leave some time for this last question that came out in Q&A. How do women find opportunities for leadership when they are in an IC role or engineers in tech? I mean, this question, that I read it also made me think that, power or authority is also synonymous to have someone having like a team, being a manager, So this question can be answered two ways. Like, how do you grow your leadership as an IC, or maybe how do you, become a manager too? Because that's also synonymous with leadership. And so, anyone can take this first.
Yeah, and maybe I'll go first because I am an IC. So obviously, Vince, Mary have been managers. As an IC, again, it's that authority that, I don't think of me having a diminished leadership sort of role. I take the role that I'm given, and then I try to make it, the best possible work that I can do, which typically leads to other opportunities. And for example, the AI and sustainability role, I was asked to interview for this role because I had done so many stretch projects that aligned to it, that I was ready for this next step. So I think that, when you're in an IC role, it's not about getting it again to that next level, but it's about building your brand of consistency and ensuring that people see the value that you can bring to the table. And I think that's the magic.
I would add, developing good storytelling skills. Again, we all have opportunity to shine. I do think that we all, by being bold, we have opportunity. We just sometimes don't think because we sit in a seat and we're an IC that should be a limiting factor to our success, right? I mean, Microsoft gives people a lot of latitude to do great work and be outside the box at times, right? The box isn't as well structured as is in a lot of other corporations. And I'm not demeaning other corporations and how they're structured, but roles, you have a scorecard, you have a set of operating principles that you need to operate within, but there's also opportunities to do those stretch objectives that Dina spoke about. And people really can shine there. I mean, there's opportunity. It comes back to what we talked about in these principles. But what if you had this bold passion around something and you saw a gap there and you could solve for that gap? Like, what, the organization encourages it. I, as a leader, would certainly encourage somebody taking on a big, bold initiative and running with it and doing great work. I mean, that's the best way to shine in any organization.
Yeah. And I just saw Jennifer's comment in the window. Hi, Jennifer. And that's exactly it. You really do lead when you coach and you develop and mentor others. I have a couple of folks that have asked me to be their mentor. And, at first I'm like, wow, but it is so nice when we get on the phone and we do it about once a month. And I learn about myself as I'm sharing, tips and tricks, but then I want to know about them. And then it becomes this really beautiful cycle, if you will.
I think that
someone asked a question about storytelling skills, and I'm going to promote unselfishly the podcast here. I recently had as a guest Miri Rodriguez, who is a master storyteller at Microsoft, was in the engineering organization. She now leads global recruiting, the global recruiting organization. And we had an excellent conversation just a couple of weeks ago about storytelling and brand storytelling specifically. She's written a book, in fact, Brand Storytelling, that's available on Amazon and other places. So I would encourage people, go to my podcast site, ultimateguidetopartnering.com. There's a blog post there as well as a transcript if people want to learn more about the subject matter or get her book, because she was excellent.
I wanted to go back to the management question. I field a lot of these questions as well. And I think that one, if you have the ambition to manage, go, but make sure you understand what you are asking for. A lot of folks who are high performance individuals want to manage next as the next ladder. And I don't think there's a lot of understanding that it's a huge shift away from being a performer versus a service-oriented person. Every day you're serving your team, you're giving them your energy, you're giving them your coaching. All the things that made you great to get here, you have to relearn a whole new set of skills. So how are you understanding what those skills are? What are managers that you see and aspire to be like? How could you talk about what skills they have? What are the stretch projects, as Vince outlined, to get you those skills? And how are you specifically telling all of the people around you at the leadership level that you're aspiring to do this and you're working towards it? It took me about 12 months for one of my senior individual contributors, very high performing, to find that right leadership and management job. And I had to coach him through some disappointing. He was shooting for any management job. I'm like, that's not the right one. And finally, perfect fit, great opportunity, and he's shining. So also just be thoughtful about who you're bringing on board, but be ready to do that work.
That's so powerful. I know we have 1 minute left. I'd love to just round robin and just have everyone say the one key takeaway you'd like to leave this audience with. Mary, we gonna start with you?
Oh gosh, what's the key thing? Yeah, optimism. Like the thing that I wish I was where many of you are 20 years ago, that the language and the structures around us are here to unleash everyone's potential. Of course, there's still lots of challenges in the system, but man, I would assume positive. I would assume you've got that seat. I would assume power as much as possible, because there's not as much holding you back today as has been in history. So go for it.
I would say all you need is inside you already, and be bold. A little bit of a go for it. Mary said, go for it. I say, be bold.
Yeah.
We have nothing to lose with being bold.
Yeah. And for me, it's gratitude. Always start with grounding yourself in gratitude, because everything else follows, and it's just seen in such a better light. So it makes your heart light.
And on that note, I'm very grateful to share this time with you guys, all of you, Mary, Vince, Dina, and all of our Women in Cloud attendees. And thank you, Risa, for helping us all manage this in the background too. So thank you so very much.
Thank you for leading us, Sharon.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.